Okay, call to order the November 26th meeting of the North Andover Planning Board. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the North Andover Planning Board will be conducted in person and via remote means in accordance with applicable law. Specific information and general guidelines for remote participation by members of the public and or parties with a right and or requirement to attend this meeting can be found on the town's website at www.northandoverma.gov. In-person meeting of attendance of members of the public and board members will be permitted. Members of the public who wish to watch the meeting live may do so on their televisions by tuning to Comcast Channel 8, Verizon Channel 26, or online at www.northandovercam.org. Every effort will be made to ensure the public can adequately access the proceedings in real time. In the event that we aren't able to do so, despite best efforts, we will post on the Town of North Andover website an audio or video recording, transcript, or other comprehensive record of proceeding as soon as possible after the meeting. Members of the public would like to participate in public hearings but not attend the meeting in person. Please email your question or comment prior to or during the meeting to Jean Enright at jenright@northandoverma.gov. Your question or comment will be read during the proceeding and responded to accordingly. Jean, could you please take roll?
Sure. Kate Kelly? Present. Sean Kevlon?
Here.
John Simons?
Yep.
Eitan Gober?
I'm here.
Peter Boynton?
Aye.
Chris Koskoris?
Here.
Okay.
Trouble with your name.
All right. First, we're going to do bond release, 1975, 1985, 1995 Salem Street, Livingston Development Corp. Request for release of two $10,000 performance bonds associated with September 5th, 2017 land disturbance permit, which allow for the construction of 3 single-family homes and grant approval of a certificate of compliance for the project.
So the project is fully completed and the homes have been occupied for several years. The engineer certification letter from the Moore and Cameron Group and an as-built plan are included in your meeting packet. The conservation administrator has visited the site and confirmed the site is constructed in accordance with the approved plans. The Conservation Commission issued a certificate of compliance at their last meeting, and I've included in your meeting packet a certificate of completion for the land disturbance permit. I will add that the one thing I should have included on this is a condition that the decision gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds.
Okay. Can we get a motion to approve the bond release on the condition that the certificate of completion is filed at the Registry of Deeds?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Approved?
Thank you very much.
All right, good work today. All right. Stone Cleave, we're going to do a discussion item, Stone Cleave Road Lots, Barbara J. Adams, right of first right of refusal, Chapter 61, Map 104, B, lots 139, 140, 141. Gene, what can you tell us about this and why it's before us?
All right, so the town has the opportunity to exercise a first right of refusal for the vacant Chapter 61 land, approximately 13 acres, which is currently under a P&S for sale and development. Although the site contains wetlands and state natural heritage and endangered species program for priority and estimated habitat, it's fairly isolated from other open space properties and does not lend to trail linkages as outlined in the open space and rec plan. The Conservation Commission has taken the land into consideration and has voted to pass on pursuing the property for acquisition. The commission felt the purchase price of $1,155,000 could be better spent on other conservation projects that reap more benefits for the town as a whole. Protection of these resources on the site, in the commission's opinion, adequately implemented through the local permitting process, as well as anticipated restrictions from national heritage will place on the project. And what's being sought is the board's opinion as to whether the town should pursue acquisition of these lots. And that opinion would be shared with the Board of Selectmen.
Right. Just so for everyone on the board's edification and for public edification, Chapter 61 is part of the Mass General Laws and has to do with taxes and classification of forest land. Chapter 61A is to agricultural, has similar things. So basically if you get this designation of a Chapter 61, you have more benefits under tax law. But one thing you have to do is, if you're going to sell the property, offer it to the town first. So we're being this property's up for sale, someone's going to buy it, and so the owner's saying, okay, I got the benefit of this tax break. Now, town, if you want to buy it first at market value, you can. So they're asking us whether, as a planning board, we think it would be worthwhile or important to spend $1 million on these particular lots. And we've heard from Gene that there doesn't seem to be any particular value to it. John, any history on the Stone Cleave?
Just a little bit of context is that this is not the first time that we've had an offer that, because they are required to offer it. I think it's a 60-day period. But there are 2 cases in the past where we've actually exercised the right of first refusal. It was at a Half Mile Hill Summit was probably the more recent one, and then the Mesorenko property, 20-odd years ago. So it is a good opportunity. The only question I have, I agree, I think in the end this probably is not a property we would want, but I guess, Gene, the Conservation Commission knows, do you know if every group in town that has any possible interest in open space has been notified of this, or like, for example, third party like Greenbelt, because we're actually allowed to assign the right of first refusal to a third party. Do you know if
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. I mean, my only thing is, I don't have a problem. In the end, I would recommend probably passing on this for all the reasons that you said, but I do think there's going to be some ones coming up in the future that we might exercise, and I think we need to go through the due diligence fully. So, I mean, I would just check with the Recreation Commission, check with, I could send a note to Greenbelt to see if there's any interest, and I doubt there would be, but I just feel like, I don't want to come back the next time we do one and somebody say, well, these guys, you let them through. Because I know there will be a few potentially coming up in the future that'll be a little bit different. The other thing, Gene, that you said is that this is interesting, is obviously the deal that these people have is contingent on them getting 3 lots out of it. So I said, if they didn't get 3 lots out of it, what happens? And what Gene said is they'd have to come back and offer it up again at the lower price, so.
Or if they found another developer that felt that they could successfully permit 3, they may get the same offer.
Or somebody could just pay for the higher price and be done with it, so, yeah.
Yep, no matter what, if this deal falls through and there's a different purchase and sale agreement, it would start over again, start the process over.
So we need a motion to, okay. John?
No, I just have a question. John, do you know if there's a minimum acreage that Essex Greenbelt takes in conservation?
They're generally bigger. I mean, to tell you the truth, I think in the end, they're not gonna say no, because it's, it's not, my first question was this adjacent to any trail land? Because, maybe we would want a trail, but it isn't. So, I think in the end, we can, I would prefer to wait till next week to finally vote, but, I mean, if we, just because we're meeting again next week, so it's only 1 week, so.
We have time?
Yep.
Okay, so let's, all right, so let's do that, and then if you want to have any
Yeah,
discussion,
I'll just talk to Greenbelt and,
just provide us feedback.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so we'll continue that. We'll join Gene, if you could just put that on the agenda as a discussion item for next week.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, John. Okay, let's go into our continued public hearings. 315 Turnpike Street, Merrimack College. Application for limited site plan review under Article 8, Part 3, Site Plan Review, and Article 10, Administration, Section 195-10.7, the North Andover zoning bylaw. Applicant proposes construction of a 19,205 gross square foot, 2-story building situated along Ahern Road, oriented in line with Sullivan Hall. The project will include utility infrastructure, stormwater management plan, and associated landscaping. The site is located within the residential 3 zoning district. Hi.
Hello, how are you?
Oh,
Good to be
wonderful.
back.
All right.
Anthony Preston, Associate Vice President of Government External Affairs and Institutional Projects, Merrimack College. And Jeff Cotteritz from VHB is to my left, as you all know very well. Happy to be back tonight to talk a little bit about the stormwater peer review and the final comments from the stormwater peer review. Before we get into that, just a quick reminder of the proposed new lecture hall. Gene, if you wanted to scoot over to the next. Yes. Just as a reminder, this is the parcel which the proposed lecture hall resides in. You can see it highlighted there in the upper left of the parcel. It is 19,000 square feet, 2 stories, 5 lecture hall style classrooms with no office space. Yeah, that's about it on the brief overview. Again, we just want to talk about the stormwater peer review tonight and that it is completed. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Jeff.
All right. Good evening, Jeff Kettertz, VHB, and just want to hit on a few of the open items we had in the last meeting just to close the loop. But as Anthony mentioned, the peer review has been completed. So the first item, the additional soil testing was performed the day after the last hearing. It confirmed the groundwater table assumptions and some infiltration rates that were a little better than what we had conservatively assumed. So no changes to the design there. We're still reducing the existing rates and volumes as proposed. The stormwater pollution prevention plan has been submitted to both towns as part of those comments. The O&M manual has been submitted for the lecture hall project. We are still working on the campus-wide one to follow up as a pre-construction condition. The rainfall data was sorted out with this is more on the Andover stormwater plan moving forward as efforts are tracked under the 2 detention basins that were built. And what we reviewed with Horsley Witten, the peer reviewer, was moving forward to make sure that for each storm event in our analysis, we're using the highest rainfall data in the analysis, whether it was from the original master plan or the current NOAA mapping. So that'll be the process moving forward, just to make sure we're conservatively studying higher rainfall amounts. And the last open item was the third-party certification letter for water quality units, which was included in the peer review response. And that was it for the outstanding items. So as far as that peer review complete, and then just an update on the Andover process, we have submitted, with completion of that peer review, we submitted updated material to Andover Concom and are planning to be in front of them next week to hopefully close out.
Okay. Jean, from our perspective from the peer review?
They did close out all of the open items that were discussed at the last meeting.
Okay. And do we have something in the decision that they'll need to obtain clearance from the Andover Concom?
Yep. Prior to land disturbance, they have to provide proof of approval from Andover.
Okay. And is there any North Andover Concom involvement?
No.
No.
Okay. All right. Okay. Did any public comments come in that we have not addressed?
No.
Is there any members of the public here that wish to make a comment on 315 Turnpike Street? Any board member questions or comments? Okay, can we get a motion to close the public hearing as to 315 Turnpike Street?
So moved.
Motion made. Can we get a second? All in favor? Aye. Okay, public hearing is closed. Now what we're going to do is review the draft decision. If there are any suggested changes, edits, I assume you've read the draft decision and do not have any issues with it? Okay. And even though you're dealing with Andover Concom, the site falls entirely within the town of North Andover for this
Correct.
project?
Yeah. Yeah.
So a reminder to all board members, this is through the limited site plan review under our Dover bylaw, and that's why we have the special, basically findings as to Dover regulations that we can use.
question. Should there be reference in the finding of fact to some of this project being in Andover's jurisdiction?
Well, the site is all within our jurisdiction. They have jurisdiction based on their stormwater, right, through Concom.
Correct, yeah, it just because it drains to one of the detention basins.
So I don't think we need to
ultimately.
find any fact as long as we're saying that, as long as there's a condition that
Okay.
we get a sign off from them, which is condition number 22. Okay, any other questions or comments? Can a motion to approve the limited site plan review special permit?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's approved. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much.
Thank you all. Happy Thanksgiving.
All right. Okay, moving,
And of the jurisdiction.
there you go.
So I could strike as amended in that,
Yes.
no amendments.
No amendments. Okay, 335 Salem Street, JCE Property Development LLC, application for watershed special permit under Article 4, Part 5, and Article 10, Section 195, 10.7 of the zoning bylaw to authorize construction of a new single-family house, infrastructure and site grading on an undeveloped lot within the non-discharge zone and subsurface drainage within the non-disturbance zone of the watershed protection district. Hello.
Great, hello. For the record, my name's Jack Sullivan. I'm owner of the Sullivan Engineering Group, and I'm here with the applicant, Jim Erb. And the board may or may not remember, we were in front of you a number of months ago. There was an issue that a variance had been granted by the ZBA that had lapsed. We reapplied to the ZBA. In the interim, what happened on, just on November 20th, the governor signed in to effect an economic development bill that gave extensions on permits for a 2-year period. Anything signed between January 1st of 2023 to January 1st of 2025, special permits, variances, order of conditions with conservation commissions, they'll get extended for 2 years. So this was on hold with you guys on the watershed permit until we had resolved the issue with the ZBA. It seems like we have at this point. So we're back in front of you. I know the peer reviewer was okay with all the changes I made, and we had really just put this on hold until we worked everything out on the variance, which we believe we have now.
Gene, we've confirmed this new legislation and that it applies to this situation? As far as you-
Confirmed with town council. I know-
Or just have you've seen the,
I've seen it, I've read it. It is a permit extension.
okay,
It's similar to the Permit Extension Act that happened after 2008. And at that time, it was a 2-year tolling, and that one got extended an additional 2 years at the time, so from 2010 to 2012.
and the theory being that there was a lot of increased construction costs and things like that.
It's an
and-
economic development bond bill.
Okay. Okay, so you guys were in front of the ZBA. It's my understanding that there was, that you guys kind of going through the hearing, you presented, there was a butter comment, things like that?
Correct.
Okay, so I think I agree that I think we are right to move forward, but I want to just make sure that everyone has the opportunity to be heard on this, and but I still want to move forward expeditiously. It's been a long process. So and I want to, because it's been a while, I want to go through the project again and
Sure.
hear everything.
Okay.
But hold on, but here's my question for you and for the board. I don't see any members, one of the things that's confusing is that the last time you were before the ZBA, it got continued until a date in December, right? And so everyone who was there was told it's going to be back in front of the ZBA middle of December. Then it was withdrawn, which they have the right to do because now they don't need to go through it. But I don't know that anyone gets notice of that withdrawal or that they need to be here. So I at least want to give everyone a chance to be here. We're meeting again next week. We don't have a draft decision yet, so what I'm going to ask is for Gene to draft a decision so that we can potentially have a decision next week. But I'd like to hear everything kind of on the record. And I guess my preference would be just do it next week instead of doing it tonight and then making you do it again. But if people want to hear it now, that's okay too. I don't know what everyone's thoughts on that
Well,
are.
I mean, to the extent that there are issues and questions, we should get them on the table, I suppose. I mean, but,
So
you know,
from our peer reviewer, everything's been closed out, that
Yeah.
everything's been kind of established, the stormwater, the peer review, and again, we heard that there is some that water is a problem in the area, but this doesn't make it worse and probably makes it a little bit better. That's at least according to the reports. It seemed like that there was a lot of a butter comment about this might happen or this might happen, and I think we should hear that out, but I don't think from our perspective in terms of what we've have from our own experts, there's really nothing to kind of close out. It's a kind of a typical watershed special permit. At least for I can see, Gene, is there anything
Nope.
added? I mean, I know there's an issue with an abutter and an easement and stuff like that, not really part of our watershed special permit authority to kind of deal with that issue. So, I mean, I'd like everything to kind of be raised, and if we need to address it, we can, but I don't think on our end that there's any, I don't have any open questions.
The
Can I make a statement?
Just 1 second.
Sure.
So the ZBA continued to a date after your next meeting.
Right.
So it's not as though those abutters are gonna show up to a ZBA meeting ahead of. if
I
you
know,
render
I know,
decision.
I know, I'm just trying to balance the
but
equities.
no, it's right. I mean, I think that from our mandate to bring public, I mean, I think we learned from the, the project downtown, that people complained about that. I think you're taking the right approach. We ought to let those people know when you ought to give them their day in court, I mean, so to speak.
Yeah, so I mean, we definitely can't decide it today. We don't have a decision ready to issue today. So our next meeting is next week. I'd rather not continue it out till the end of December if we don't have to, but those are the equities that we're kind of balancing. So, yeah, if you want to say something, you're
Yeah,
free to.
so my name is James Erb, and my wife here, Maria. The two of us own GC Property Development. We bought this property 7 months ago, and we have heard from the neighbors on the issues, and we've addressed the issues. I'm not gonna be here next week. I'm actually going out of town to visit family.
Okay.
So I mean, I think it's unfair to us, being that we've already gone 7 months. We're into this over $500,000. And, you know, time is obviously, like they say, money, you know. My wife and I do this for a living. We build basically one house every year and a half, okay? And this has taken 7 months, you know, and we don't have a dime into this, and all we're doing every month is paying interest. I don't really see a need that we need to extend this, because they've all voiced their opinions, even though some of them have lied, and I have a video to even prove it.
Okay, but see, this is the stuff that we're in the middle of a hearing on that I respect that you have the right to say that, but I can't, I don't feel right not letting people respond to things like that.
But I mean, this is a scheduled meeting for tonight. Why aren't they here? I mean, what's
Because
their
the-
excuse? I mean,
I'm not in the business of making
You're not
excuses for
making the
them,
sale very
but.
well.
no, but I'm just saying, I mean, you gotta be, you have to understand our situation. 7 months.
We do
Yep.
You know?
understand your situation. I hear your situation, but to some degree, the fact that you let the variance lapse is not on us.
I beg to differ on that, and that's
All
not
right, so
probably
this-
I don't wanna
for
have
this
an
board
argument
to
with you
decide,
on it. This is
obviously,
my whole
correct,
point
right?
is
All right.
You're much better served by not being argumentative.
We don't have a decision to make today, so if you want to make a presentation today, you're more than welcome to, but we're not making a decision today. I don't have a decision drafted, we don't have anything to decide on. And frankly, yes, if I were in a butter and I heard from the ZBA that the next time this is going to be heard is the middle of December, there's no, and yes, maybe some of them get the agenda every week, I don't know. But again, it's something that could very well slip through the cracks, and I understand that. And again, I'm looking to continue until next week. So, and we don't have a table where there's no timeline for which we are required to issue decisions. So, we're,
Just out of curiosity, how many times did you have to re-go to the ZBA? Did you even show up? Was there one meeting that you continued?
So I'm gonna say that this is how the whole thing approached. When I had got wind of the property was for sale, I had actually went to Paul Hutchins and told him my concern was of the variance lapsing. And all he told me I needed to do was file for a building permit. It wasn't until after the fact. And since then, when we bought this April 5th, I hired Jack right away. And Gene is aware of that, because Gene and I had this conversation about hiring Jack, where Jack had done all the work previously. And I hired Jack right away. So, I mean, we've been on this for 7 months. I didn't know that it was going to expire. What I understood from what I read was that as long as we were exercising on the variance, then we would keep the variance.
Right.
And
So-
I didn't know any different.
I think the answer is twice since it left
So
here.
you've been back in front of them twice, and it was
Correct.
2 times, and
Yeah.
then it was continued out till mid-December for a third time?
Right?
Correct. And I understand those were hearings where you guys presented and butters presented information, and I can't comment on the accuracy of any of that, but it was not something that was unattended. And so I guess I just feel like where people had been here in the past and that there's been this other process, it'd be understandable for people not to know that this is occurring. So I think we should try to reach out to the extent that we can. And so I'll give. I'm not sure. There's really not a mechanism for us because we don't have like a list of people's names, and unless we do we have, were there notices for the original?
We have a butter notice.
Can we,
I can't mail something in time for next Tuesday.
right,
If you have any email addresses, has anybody ever contacted?
There's one that I may have. She's left voicemails, so I'd have to search. Voicemails come through as Cisco something or another, so I'd have to bring up every voicemail I've received. Try to find out if it was her, but I know it's the woman that owns the original farmhouse. So I'm pretty sure I can find her number, but then I'd be in a situation where I'm noticing one of the butters that did provide comment
Yeah.
here when there were several.
okay. Well, I mean, what we'll do is we'll post the agenda as we normally do, and we'll try to figure it out from there. I'm not sure that there is much else that we can do. So, again, if you want to make a presentation now and give us the information now, you can, but I think I'm going to ask for it again next week.
Right, Mr. Chairman, I suggest I just wait to
Yeah.
make the presentation, so I'd repeat the same thing to the
Yeah,
board
and
again
I think
next
that's
week,
right.
and if the public's here. So if I can wait on that, that's fine.
Okay, all right. And if that doesn't work because you're not here, we can do it out, but I'm happy to hear it next week and hear the presentation. I just want to give people a little bit longer just to be able to potentially.
We've had examples in the past where people are out of town, but they can participate
Yep.
virtually.
Yes, if anyone wanted to participate remotely, that would be fine too. And again,
So you can do that if you choose.
Say that again?
if
While
you want to
you're out of
participate
town,
remotely.
You can participate in the meeting remotely
Oh, okay.
by
Yeah.
phone or video.
Oh, okay,
And
that's
we've had
fine.
other people do that.
Okay, yeah,
Yep.
that would be helpful.
Yep,
You
so,
want to check ahead of time to make sure you know the correct way to do that,
Yep.
so you don't miss it if you want to join.
Yep.
so Gene, can we set it for a remote, or for a hybrid meeting? And we'll send you the link, because it's not open to everyone in the public. You have to
Sure.
let us know, so we'll send
That would
you or
be-
Jack
that
the
would be
link.
great.
So that
Thank
you
you
can
very
do that.
much.
Okay, yeah, and again, we're not, without commenting on the ultimate decision, having everybody and being able to have everyone be heard is kind of is an important part of the process for us. And I think it informs us and it helps us move on to closing things out. Okay? Okay, so we'll continue that until next week, which is December 3rd? Okay. December 3rd, 2024. Okay, wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, 1250 Osgood Street, 1250 Osgood Street LLC, application for a limited site plan review special permit and site plan review and parking special permit under Article 8 supplementary regulations, Part 3 site plan review, Article 8, 195, 8.17.1, limited site plan review, Article 8, Part 1, 195, 8.8, parking special permit, and Article 10, administrations, 195, 10.7. Applicant proposes raising of the existing building and related improvements and redevelopment of the property into a 2 or 3-story building of approximately 21,145 square feet. New building to be used for childcare facility and associate play area, along with medical office uses and other uses as may be allowed under the zoning bylaw. Property is located in the I-2 zoning district. Okay, Gene.
So Since the last meeting, stormwater review has been completed. The applicant has revised the plan set to include a 15-foot radius at the entrance from the roadway into the site. TEC has confirmed that this addresses their comment, and the building commissioner has confirmed that the radius complies with the bylaw.
Wonderful.
The applicant has also revised the plan to include proposed access way from the south parking lot to the other parking area adjacent to the building, along with a crosswalk that connects to the handicap stall marked lane,
Great.
which thus provides access to the sidewalk leading to the front entrances. The net effect is the loss of 2 parking spaces in the total project parking count. TEC has confirmed that the access path and stair does provide pedestrian access to the building from the lower lot and addresses their concern. The reduction of 2 parking spaces results in 88 spaces overall, where 78 spaces are required per the zoning bylaw. Revised site plans that address the sidewalk and radius are included in your meeting packet, along with a revised lighting plan. The lighting plan confirms no light spillover across property boundaries. Now, since the writing of the staff report, we did receive some resident comment related to handicap ADA compliance
Yep.
in the sidewalk in front of the building, and that plan was revised as of yesterday, I believe, to show the handicap ramps and a detail for the wheelchair ramp as well.
Okay, and thank you to John Strauss for those comments. I had a question. So you said 88 parking spots and 78 are required?
Yeah.
Now, the application, we have the childcare facility, and we have medical uses and other uses as may be allowed under the zoning bylaw. So now I think, I heard that it's currently planned for medical. What if the medical doesn't happen and it's a different type of office use? How do we confirm that the right amount of parking, that it has the right amount of parking spaces? Like, if it's still under 88, fine,
Yep.
we're awash, but what if now it's a type of, again, I don't think this is happening, but if it's a type of use that requires 100 parking spaces, does that require a
If
modification?
If a restaurant went in, we
Right.
always run into trouble, but
Yeah,
just like any strip mall, when that change of use application comes in for a different tenant, they have to show that they're compliant with parking to the building commissioner. If they're not, they often have to come back for relief for that, for a special permit to either reduce, or the uses peak hours are
Yep.
so different that that's a different
So-
common facility permit.
so that makes sense to me, but the only question I have is that does our decision, because the application says for medical uses and other uses as may be allowed, does our decision limit it to medical uses or other uses? I just want to condition it that it's only up to the 88 parking, and anything kind of more than that
Yep.
would have to be, could be a minor modification, but it would somehow have to be addressed.
Yeah.
If the uses now total more than the parking spots.
So I asked John, actually, before the meeting, to talk that through,
Oh,
because he
wonderful.
did apply for a parking special
Waiver,
permit.
yeah.
No, for a special
Oh,
permit.
Yeah,
For flexibility in
Yeah.
the parking standard, and so we kind of have to flesh that out. It's a placeholder application, but he did apply for it.
okay,
As it stands right now, it's not needed. The
Right.
placeholder's not needed, but with common facilities like this, it's often that an applicant has to come back.
okay. So, on the same page, that's great. So John, why don't you tell us what's a good way to address that?
Well, just for the record, John Smolak, attorney for the applicant, with Steve Stupinski, our project engineer. We dealt with this at the Burton's Plaza
Okay,
in the
yeah.
past, where it was permitted for a certain set of uses with parking and so on, and so I think it's a fair question, and I think that from a practical standpoint, what would happen is, as Gene had indicated, is if we have a use other than medical office use, and that would be reviewed by, Gene and the building commissioner to determine adequacy of parking. And if there's an adequate amount of parking, then certainly it would proceed. But on the other hand, if we needed additional parking, we'd have to come back to the board for additional relief.
Okay, all right, so the decision so as of now, it's just plan, daycare, medical use. If other uses come in, then you'll go to Gene and the building commissioner, make sure that the parking is covered. If it's covered, then go ahead, you don't have to come back to us.
Right.
If there's a question, come back and either modify, minor modification, et cetera.
Yeah, it could be medical uses or other uses that satisfy the parking requirements.
Right, okay, that's fine. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
so-
fine, okay. Okay, so I just want to look, when we look at the decision, I just want to make sure we have that language crafted that way. Okay, anything, yep?
It's a question on the radiuses, so you got them to 15?
Yes.
So what did you, I may have missed it, would you end up pushing the building back, or did you reconfigure some of the front there, or how did you achieve it?
What I did is I got a clarification as to what the bylaw really says, and I read the bylaw through rather than just reading the tech comment, which kind of implied to me, or the way I understood it was, the 15-foot radius had to be like 180 degrees into the site. Well, and that's what the sketches were that I gave you. But in fact, that's not the case, that it's on the curb approach into the driveway. Confirmed that with TEC, and I was able to make the modification with a compound curve, so to speak, on the curbing, so.
It was actually like a
Yeah.
different calculation
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
what was going on.
So on the site plan where I'm circling,
Yep.
the radius coming in is 15, but you see the interior radius is 8 and 13
Right,
on this
right.
side, and the same happens on this.
Right, which is permitted.
Okay, good, awesome. It's good that they-
How
Go ahead, yeah, please, go ahead.
does that relate to the public comment we received about 30-foot radii? Or about the Mass DOT requirements?
They have to go through Mass DOT access permitting, and that will be vetted with Mass DOT. We can't specify what Mass DOT is going to require.
So it could change.
It could change, and the draft decision will condition, if material changes are made, they'll need to come back and modify this permit.
The other thing I would point out, that the design manual, Mass DOT design manual, has 15-foot radiuses. Sometimes they require 30 if it's a higher speed roadway. If you go out to the site, you'll see the way Mass DOT built it is with no radiuses. So they literally have a slope coming down with no radiuses into it because they created another lane. Used to be 125 was, Osgood Street was one lane in each direction and had a breakdown lane that was rather wide. So they made it 2 lanes in each direction and made a narrow breakdown lane and literally built out to the edge of the layout line except for a sidewalk. And they have no radiuses there right now. So theoretically, we could permit it the way they have it with the no radius sidewalk detail that is also in the Mass Highway Design Manual, so, which is kind of interesting.
Well, we appreciate that it's built to our particular
Yeah.
bylaws, and if Mass
Yeah.
DOT has a differing opinion, we'll deal with it at the time.
Yep.
Okay, anything else, Gene, on the table?
So just to show the sidewalk access
Yep,
is
please.
across this handicap stall, up 3 steps, I believe, across here with a crosswalk to the next handicap stall. And so
Okay.
that gets them to the sidewalk that is adjacent to the building.
And thank you for hearing our concerns on that and addressing that. That's much appreciated.
Yep.
Okay, any other board member questions or comments? Okay, we got the additional comment online from Mr. Strauss. Any members of the public here? Seeing none, okay. Can we get a motion? Are we ready to, no, not yet, okay.
Next week,
Next week.
I can draft a decision for next week.
Okay.
There's still, these changes were coming in as of
Okay.
this morning.
Anything you think we need to address? Anything else?
Well, I guess you're holding a meeting, was it the 3rd, December
Yep,
3rd?
yep,
You're going to hear the decision at that time? I don't
Yep.
know if-
that would be the plan.
I'm not sure. Let's see.
So what, John, why don't we put it on for the 3rd?
Yeah,
If
Okay,
they,
maybe,
if,
okay.
and if you will have the draft decision out
Yeah.
ahead of time.
Yeah.
If there's anything if you need us to wait.
Sure.
Let us know.
Sure.
If you're comfortable moving ahead,
sure.
then we'll go ahead.
Okay.
You just let us know, okay?
Sure. And just a couple of quick items.
Yeah.
A comment from the last time in terms of the site. Actually, Steve went by the site today, and there are a couple of items. There's some trash bags that are still remaining, and that's scheduled to be cleaned up, I think, the 2nd of December. So that'll be taken care of at that time. And, I mean, there's a question about franchise and ownership and so on, too, and spoke with the applicant earlier today, and the applicant actually is part of a partnership. It's a franchisee. Learning Experience is actually an international franchise, and so this particular owner or has affiliated entities that own, I think, 7 or so of these facilities in Massachusetts, one of which is over at 1 Minuteman in Andover, and they also have facilities in California and I believe Virginia as well. So I think they're the largest franchisee for that franchise.
Okay.
So.
All right, great. Okay. All right, so we'll continue until December 3rd, barring any other, any issues, just let us know if that needs to change, okay?
Sure.
Okay, wonderful, December 3rd.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Thank
nice
you.
Thanksgiving.
All right, let's do the draft letter, and then we'll do the Affordable Homes Act. Okay, so after the hearing and the permit for the Zero Great Bond Road on the North Pump Station, we had a discussion based on a butter comments of writing a letter. So Peter and I drafted this with a little assist from Jean. So I'll just read the letter. This would come from all of us. We had talked about sending it to the police chief, but after kind of thinking about it, we decided to send it to the select board instead with a copy to the police chief and to the town manager. Dear Select Board, the Planning Board recently approved a special permit for Zero Great Pond Road, site of the old North Pump Station, to authorize site improvements, including demolition of the current boat launch, retaining wall and parking lot, and the construction of a new hand-carry boat launch, a new retaining wall, new parking facilities, and improved landscaping. The board is very excited about this project. Specifically, it will improve and more fully activate this area and allow for better use of Lake Kitchitwick by town residents, along with providing a boat ramp for emergency responders. During the public hearings, we did hear from a resident who lived across the street from the location. The gentleman noted that there have been many instances of people not following lake regulations, noise, use at night, littering, etc. Items of concern related to this area that have been raised by residents at various planning board meetings include use of parking lot after hours. The lake and parking lot are closed 1 hour after sunset. Domestic animals in the water, types of crafts in the lake that are not allowed, prohibition on trailering boats into the lake, noise, littering, lack of signage as to rules and regulations, non-town resident use of the lake and parking lot. During the public hearing for this project, we were asked by the abutter to take action as part of the permit process in enforcing lake regulations. It was the planning board's position that enforcement of 300-12 Lake Kitchitwick used boating regulations was outside our authority, but the board indicated a willingness to write to the powers that be to express the neighbors' concern and to use the opportunity of the reconstruction of this area and the increased use that we hope it brings to highlight the lake regulations and hopefully facilitate some thought and discussion on how these regulations may be better enforced. I have attached the lake regulations to this letter for your consideration. We would encourage further dialogue regarding the way regulations are both publicized and enforced. Hopefully with some added awareness and regulation, the new project will bring significant enjoyment to North Andover residents and some measure of calm to those who live in the area. That's what I would propose we send. Any questions, comments, suggested changes? Yep.
I would have edits,
Yes.
had we gotten it earlier, I was intending to do that.
Okay.
Before the
So,
actual real-time meeting, but I can do, I mean, I can.
Do you want to do it now, or do you want to
There's
do
a
it?
couple things.
Yeah,
that
go
I-
ahead. We can do it now, or we can put it off till next week. Go ahead.
Who's signing this?
So it would be.
You on behalf of the,
It would be the chair, yeah, it'd be the chair on behalf, I don't have like letterhead, so I didn't put it on, but it would be the chair on behalf of the planning board. And so we would take a vote on approving whatever we want to approve, and I'd sign it as chair of the planning board on behalf of the board.
so, just real quickly, item number 4
Yep.
in the list of items of concern, I don't
Can you scroll
understand.
to item 4, Gina?
I don't understand what that means. And
Yep.
what's trying to be conveyed with that?
So the
phrase.
lake regulations on number 4,
Yep,
they were put in place, I think, originally in the 90s. The select board updated them most recently in 2016. The original version of the lake use regulations prohibited trailering boats. You can only hand carry boats, and the rationale behind that was a town committee back in the 90s that identified a significant concern with invasive species. And a lot of times, the invasive species are carried by the trailers. So that's why, is that what you were asking?
So,
or-
well, thank you for the background. So the item of concern that was raised is that someone wants these prohibitions lifted, or that is someone violating this?
when we were drafting and commenting back and forth on the letter, the approach that I think we took was not just what we heard from the abutter at the last meeting, but I think it's worded to say, cumulatively, we have heard from residents at the planning board, and this is one of the things we've heard from time to time.
Well, I think, Kate, the way it's written is the concern isn't prohibition of trailing. The concern
I
is
see.
actually trailering boats
Yes,
into the lake. So
correct.
we should probably get rid of the words prohibition on.
Thank you.
So
Okay.
that the concern is people trailering boats
That
in.
they are
not-
doing it, and they
yes,
shouldn't be.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
so
you.
let's delete prohibition on. Okay, yes,
All right.
that makes it
And-
clearer.
And
Sorry for the unnecessary
Oh, no,
explanation.
it's very helpful background, thank you.
Yep.
Also, the use of the word "the gentleman" in the previous
Yeah.
paragraph, that's a little bit of a dated
I
term.
just didn't know his name, and
You could just say "the resident."
okay.
I
Just trying to be respectful of him, but also not sure what pronouns and stuff I'm supposed to use.
Exactly, I think
So-
it's probably,
Okay, so the resident, yeah.
And then and again, this is based on very quick review, but the last paragraph starts with "I," and
Okay,
you
we
probably
make it we.
intended "we."
Yeah. Yep, that's fine.
And just one comment on two, I would say domesticated animals, not domestic, right? Isn't what?
Oh.
So we're not worried about Canadian geese?
No.
'Cause they're-
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
international?
exactly, yeah. Or you could say domesticated pets,
Okay.
right?
All right.
I mean,
All right, so-
I'm just thinking
Nope,
like,
yeah.
if a deer goes in there, are we gonna give the deer a ticket? You know what I mean?
No, he's domestic. He's local. Okay, yes.
That's a great catch.
Yeah. All right, so domesticated, we'll change the gentleman to the resident.
It's really focused on pets, but then what if
Yeah.
it's a service animal?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
maybe
Yep.
domesticated is okay.
That's fine.
Yeah.
And change the I to a we. Okay. All right. And yeah, sorry about the run-on sentences. It's just sometimes how I write for these things. Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
it's good.
Everyone
It's
good
good.
with the letter
Yeah.
as amended?
Yeah.
Okay, and I thank you all for participating in this and for the edits are great. I just think it's, when we can't do something, I think it's important that we tell residents and people commenting that we can't do it. But to the extent that we can do something, even if it's advisory, I think it's a helpful public process. So, okay.
I think it's a great example, because otherwise what you hear is left hand, right hand, sorry, we can't help you, you know, but in this case, we're at least doing something, so thank you.
awesome.
Okay.
We have a bully pulpit, really. I mean, you know.
The extent of it perhaps varies based on the chair,
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
but they're all good.
Or the harbor master, where is that person?
The extra
No mas, no mas.
The harbor has no master.
Can we, it's not domesticated. Can we get,
Are you
so
volunteering?
a motion
I don't have
to,
a boat.
a motion to approve the letter, sending the letter as amended?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Okay, wonderful. Jean, you got those?
Yep.
Okay. All right, wonderful. Yeah, Affordable Homes Act.
All right, so there was yet another webinar this morning. It was hosted by Merrimack Valley Planning Commission, and the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities attended.
Did they pass the word that regulations are coming?
They have committed that regulations are coming, but they still cannot say when they're coming. They used phrases like sooner rather than later. They have indicated that the regulations will define things like principal dwelling, single-family residential district, gross floor area, short-term rental will be defined for the zoning purpose. My interpretation was that we will be allowed to limit lots to having one ADU only, and we don't have to require additional ADUs by special permit. If we did want to allow for additional, then it would have to be by special permit. They're going to give examples of what are reasonable versus unreasonable regulations in their guidance. And they're going to give guidance on how to deal with pre-existing non-conforming structures and lots. Utility connections, clarity will be provided. They indicated that the base regulations, what they're working off, the most fundamental base regulation is what restrictions would you consider for a single-family house? And I've said that before. They keep saying, would you do that for a single family? And that they are going to provide model bylaws at some point. And so they're sooner rather than later, acknowledging it's the holiday season and whatnot. And my takeaway is potentially mid-December, I think would be best case, but it's still just a guess.
Okay, so with that, I think we just kind of plow forward. I don't think we have to, answer every question, and we don't have to have kind of like robust debates about kind of everything. But I think we should, let's go through it just in general, and I think we should talk about the family suite thing, just because that's something that is not going to be covered. I will tell you should we talk about it now, or should we wait till we get to family suites? No, let's talk about it. I'm already talking
go
about it. So Gene and I attended the select board meeting last week? Yeah, last week.
Monday,
Just to kind of get a sense from the select board about their opinions about what we should do with the family suite. The general consensus seemed to be that similar to kind of what we talked about, that there doesn't seem to be a real need for it, given the metric limitations, but with some desire to, I think kind of the one question they came out with at the end was, is there a way for people, if their family suite is no longer in use, to make it into an ADU? So, and basically what we said was, well, if it's under 900 square feet and it meets all the other definitions, then sure, it's easy, you just apply for an ADU. The more difficult portion is going to be if it's more than 900 and less than 1,200, and it is a family suite, what happens with that? Now, there are only a couple of them. So these are the ones, Gene did a great job pulling up this list. It looks like there are 4, I think, that have been permitted.
So 934, 1,200, 1,010, and 1,134.
Okay.
And there's others that are certainly less than 900, but they required variances to get to that number. So for example, there's a 1,264-foot gross floor area home, which is a very small home. They were permitted for a 624 square foot family suite, which is essentially close to 50% of that building. But they had to go through both the special permit and variance process with the ZBA.
That would still qualify as an ADU though,
Yep,
right?
Yep.
Right. So there are only like 4 that wouldn't qualify under our ADU bylaw. I'm not sure that there's anything we can do about that.
So just a question, if we decide to repeal and replace, wouldn't those 4 be like effectively an existing non-conforming use, I guess, right? So it'd be covered under.
Pre-existing.
Pre-existing.
Well, they'd be pre-existing non-conforming, yes.
Yeah.
But they basically would still be valid until the in-law use was no longer in use, right?
Yeah.
So if they sold the house, or if the person moved out or passed away or anything like that, if it wasn't being used as a family suite, then it would no longer be valid.
Yeah.
But again, they're not enforced now, so I'm not sure it changes anything.
Right, technically, in that case, they're supposed to be dismantled in some manner that makes it no longer an independent dwelling.
What I would suggest, was talking with someone about the family suites, and they said, actually, I have been thinking about doing one of those. And it might be the kind of the more than 900. And we got talking about it and said, well, maybe even if we're not going to really use the family suites going forward, maybe we should allow them for a period of time, so that if you do have one of these between 9 and 1,200 and you want to build it now and you want to go through the restrictions, you can do it now. Like, do it for sunset it.
Yeah, so
Basically just
sunset
sunset it in 2 or 3 years. We don't have to repeal it. We don't have to replace it. All we have to do is
just
say
sunset the
this bylaw sunsets in 2028 or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Then as a matter of law, after that, you can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And gives people an opportunity, if they want to do it now, to do it and have the restrictions.
That's not a bad idea.
I think it-
That's not a bad idea.
yeah.
Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like, the one thing, I think if we have the opportunity to streamline things and clean
Right.
up, like, our bylaws, I think we should do it, and especially given that there's only effectively 4 use people, like 4 For houses that are actually like using the family suite?
in
that
over
wouldn't be-
10 years.
Yeah.
There's
so-
21 in 10 years that even
Yeah.
permitted a family suite.
Right, so this gives you, so maybe we'll get 3 or 4 more,
Yeah.
probably at most in the next
Yeah.
3 years. Because otherwise, even if you wanted your in-law to move in, and you're doing an 800 square foot one, there's no reason to do it as a
Yeah.
family suite, because you're just adding restrictions to yourself. You're
Yeah.
costing yourself money, time,
totally.
so it
Yeah.
doesn't make sense. So I think we talked about it in the idea of a sunset, and
Yeah.
that seemed to make sense to me.
Yeah, I think the only thing we would need to figure out is the temporal component to it, right? It's like how long
Right.
is it gonna take to sunset?
Yeah.
Right? Like, and because we don't want it like, it's got sunset in 10 years.
No, I'd say 2 or 3
I
years.
think it's like, yeah. I think it's
2 or 3 years, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it also corresponds kind of with what we were talking about in the hearing about the economic package, that they're extending permits for 2 years.
Yeah, yeah.
So again, it's been hard this last couple of years with building expenses and everything. It makes sense to do it 2 or 3 years. If someone wants to do it, great. If not, after 3 years, you've had your fair chance. Now build an ADU if you
I
want.
think it's a good compromise.
Yeah.
So how does that address when the person that received the special permit to live in that family suite is no longer living in that family suite?
It doesn't. It doesn't. So I think the answer is, for any of these that are, if it meets the definition of an ADU, which it should, then you can just apply
For an
for an
ADU.
ADU permit, and there really won't be much for you have to do. I mean, because it's already there,
Yeah.
and most of these are attached. The only thing we could say is, even if one is detached, we could maybe exempt it from the special permit one, where it's already been through the process of a family suite, if we want. But for the ones that already exist and are non-conforming in the sense that it's 1,000 square feet, I think it just becomes, it's not in compliance anymore. And technically, you would have to remove it, or take out the door and make it into an in-law apartment, or make it into an addition. Or it's just not gonna be checked, like it's not checked right now. I mean, I don't like leaving it that way, but
Yeah.
I don't, if we're making it into a prior non-conforming use, that's what happens
Yeah.
with prior non-conforming
Yeah.
uses.
But it's, I mean, I think it'd be a very different discussion if like we had 100.
Exactly,
Right?
yes.
And it's 4
Right.
at the end of the day, right? So
Right. Right,
I think we could probably manage against 4,
I think so.
right?
But that would argue in favor of just not extending it too. If there is not that much demand, there's rumor that one might,
Right, no, yeah, I think the sunsetting thing is, will it be highly used? I doubt it. I think it's just if there's 1 or 2 opportunities for people to, I think the ones that are larger, there might be that 1 or 2 people that have this opportunity that could use it. So I don't think we're harmed very much into it, but do I think it's gonna be very beneficial? No. I think it's just I think it's an easy mechanism too, rather than pulling it out and putting it into the bylaw and then replacing it. I actually think sunsetting is easier. We
Yeah.
could just do it and
I mean-
we could just
Yeah.
repeal it.
Yeah, you could, yeah.
But
yeah.
I think sunsetting just
And
gives
you know,
people
you
a
can give
couple
people the
options.
optionality,
Yeah.
but like,
Short time period.
if people are gonna invest in building a family suite, I think they're gonna invest in building a detached structure, an ADU, like an ADU,
I would-
right? And then actually, I think that's probably the direction that
Yeah,
people are gonna go down, in my opinion. But
yeah, or just make an addition too. I mean,
Yeah,
just making
yeah,
an
yeah.
addition too,
Yeah,
so. Okay, great, so that's the kind of family suite discussion. All right, so Jean, why don't we just kind of walk through the bylaw, and then we'll call it a day.
Okay, so as you saw, I've separated out the ADU bylaw from the supplemental amendments that need to be made because of an ADU bylaw. And the reason for that is the ADU bylaw, per general law, is a simple majority vote. I have to confirm this with town council, but all the other supplemental amendments, which are Article 2, 4, and 8, require a 2/3 vote. And so I would see it as the ADU would have to be presented first in the warrant, followed by this one. And in the explanation, we'll have to get town council to make sure she confirms the quantum.
Okay.
All right, so for the bylaw is structured, the warrant article is structured like a typical bylaw amendment, where it begins with adding a new Part 14 to Article 8. So if you remember correctly, the inclusionary zoning was the last part we introduced, and so that was Part 13. This follows 13 now as a new part within supplementary regulations. The purpose and intent And I just reviewed a lot of ADU bylaws, some of which are no longer compliant, and they're going to have to amend them. But for purpose and intent, I just picked out the ones that I thought were appropriate, but certainly up for discussion if anybody feels strongly to add or delete from that.
And Jean, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go ahead.
Jean, you and I had talked a little bit about purpose and intent, and I had mentioned that I saw something in the act, and it is section 1 of the act. It's at the very beginning of the Affordable Homes Act. It talks in general terms about some of the intent behind what the legislature was doing. And I think you have captured some of those notions in the purpose and intent that we put together. I mean, whether or not it can be wordsmithed differently to better reflect the intent of the board, but.
And it's okay, yeah, when we do bylaws like this, if there is anything that you kind of specifically see in terms of wording or editing, typos, any of that, you can do it here, but it's probably, especially where we have time, if you go home and see something, redline it, send it to Jean, and she can make those changes or put them in as suggestions, and then we can talk about them. So especially where we have time, so that's definitely very helpful.
Yeah, and going forward, you'd see redline versions of
Yeah.
this.
And that goes for anybody. If anybody sees anything that they think they want to add or change, or just redline and send it just to Jean, and then she'll bring it to us and we can talk about it.
So for applicability, A is saying that for an attached ADU or an ADU within an existing structure, that process would go strictly through the building commissioner.
Do you want to scroll down, or is that?
Oh, sorry. So that application for an attached or within would be made to the building commissioner, and he would enforce this new ADU bylaw and make sure that that application is compliant with all the requirements and conditions in the bylaw as well as Mass General Law.
And I think that kind of captures what Gina was talking about earlier, the state's kind of informal guidance of what would you do if it was a single-family home, right? Basically, if it was an addition, you're not getting a permit, you're just going to the building inspector and make sure it complies with zoning. So if it's within the house, if it's attached to the house, we're basically treating it like an addition.
And so for the detached ADU, that would require limited site plan review. It falls under the Dover Amendment. And so that application would be made to the planning board as opposed to the building commissioner. And then issuance of any building permit would be in compliance with, we'll get to these, but we have a list of general requirements and a list of use, dimensional, and physical requirements, as well as the requirements of limited site plan review for detached units. And then, based on the last discussion with the board, an ADU is permitted use by right within a lot containing a one-family dwelling in any zoning district where a one-family dwelling is a permitted use. So, in the last presentation, I had told you that I defined what is a single-family residential district, because that's used in the legislation but not defined. And so based on the conversation where you wanted to limit these to single families, I took the definition out for single-family residential district and replaced wherever I was using that term with this. Now, when the guidelines and regulations coming out, I don't know that we'll be able to do this, but for now, I suggest just leaving it in, and once those come out, we may have to amend.
So ours is saying it's got to be on a single-family house, not on a duplex, not on anything else. What I think Jean, you had mentioned, at least to me, that in the webinar meeting, that question is specifically raised, and there will likely be an answer in the guidelines. Whether it's the answer we want or not, we don't know, but it will likely be addressed because
Yes.
the issue has been raised multiple times.
Multiple times.
Okay.
And
So-
for two-family, multifamily condos, it's being asked a number of different ways, and so they've acknowledged that they have to provide guidelines.
Should we consider an exception in certain cases to allow an ADU in a multifamily by special permit if there's some, or do we not want to open that door at all? I mean, I'm just imagining, I
Well,
could see somebody come with a property.
The problem is with multifamily, what's the distinction between an ADU and another unit in a multifamily?
The dimensional requirements, perhaps. I
It's
don't disagree with you, but here's what I was imagining. mean, we've had some multifamily properties over the years, and let's say the property's divided into 4 apartments, but there's unused space that is not part of any one of those property or those apartments for a variety of reasons over time, but could be a small additional living space, make use of it. I think it's unlikely, I just wanted to throw
No,
a question out.
yeah, it's fair. I just worry that the whole idea is we set up those multifamily limits for a reason.
Yes. Okay, I'm
so,
happy to
yeah.
let it go, I just wanted to throw it out there.
I really think ADUs are, I think it's a great tool to use, but I do think it's really meant for single-family homes. But if we are required or not allowed to limit it to single-family homes, then I think the idea of having it as a special permit is a really good idea.
Yeah.
So I like leaving this for now,
Yeah.
unless we hear something
Okay.
compelling.
Thanks.
But I think the idea of, even if it's attached to a multifamily, I think a special permit
Yeah,
is the way to go, which we're allowed to do, right?
I don't.
I don't see
The
why not.
legislation is you can't require a special permit, it's an.
Oh, not a
actual
special
use.
permit, well, I'm sorry, the limited site plan review, the same thing we do, treat it as a
Okay,
detached.
that's different.
Sorry,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Treat it as a,
Sorry.
treat it as the same way as attached. It can't be a special permit, but treat it as the same way as a detached,
Yeah.
is what I meant. There needs to be more oversight.
I was sitting here like,
No. There needs to, it's not this, it's more like a detached in the sense of now you're affecting multiple groups, not just your own property, like an addition, because you literally have neighbors that are attached to you. So I think we treat it more as something that could have more of an effect on your neighbors. Oh man, that could get dicey. Okay.
so then I have a clause where the ADU is proposed in a legally pre-existing non-conforming structure or lot in any zoning district where one-family dwelling is permitted use. The ADU shall require a special permit or finding by the building commissioner and/or zoning board of appeals in accordance with Article 9 and Article 10 of the zoning bylaw.
And that's what's already required, right?
That's already required, and I think we'll get additional guidelines
Okay.
related to that clause. So the application essentially asking for a gross floor area of the existing dwelling, of the proposed ADU, elevations showing sides of the building affected. The site plan would show the footprint of the existing dwelling structure, the location of parking, driveway, demonstrating parking is sufficient for all uses, the gross floor area, and the location and design of all ingress and egress to and from the ADU. The site plan must be prepared and stamped by a registered land surveyor. The homeowner has to consent to an inspection upon reasonable notice from the building inspector. And a cease and desist shall be issued for any work in progress
Can you go
that is not compliant with the bylaw.
back to the top of this section, right there? All right, thanks.
And the reason I include and/or waivers, you're gonna see there's a number of conditions that could be waived. So under general requirements, and this is, both the building commissioner would have to adhere to these, as well as the planning board for detached ADUs. So this is just, it has to be a complete separate housekeeping unit, so this is just complying with the definition in Mass General Law. Where a watershed or other special permit is required, or a variance from the zoning bylaw is requested in connection with the ADU, the specific provisions of the zoning bylaw still apply. And that's very similar to what we have in limited site plan review. And then prohibition on more than one ADU in this district. And that they're not eligible for zoning dimensional variance, proposing to increase the number of allowable ADUs on a lot.
Right, so we say you can only do one ADU on a lot, and you can't go for a variance to say, I need more than one ADU. I don't know how that would actually meet a criteria for a variance, but.
Let me ask how that would work in a hypothetical example. So some of the properties around the lake, they have not only a house, but some of the older ones, they have like these camp buildings that are right on the shoreline.
Okay.
And they're wooden structures, fully enclosed, windows, closed doors, presumably unheated, no bathroom, but could an owner of that, and they're like right on the shoreline. I think they were like camp buildings back in the day, even before John was on the planning board. So could someone say, oh, well, I have a structure, I'm gonna, or would the distance from the high water of the lake have any impact under this limited approach, Dover Amendment? Or could you transform one of those unheated, non-living camp buildings to a residence right on the shoreline? And when I say on the shoreline, I mean like within 5 or 10 feet of the water.
So it's detached, right?
Yeah,
So, okay, so it falls under the detached portion, so it
Yeah.
would need the limited site plan review under this. It would need a watershed special permit, so this is saying that it still would require a watershed special permit.
I think it would be variance.
And it need variances.
And it would probably need a variance,
yeah.
because and probably Concom too, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it would need a lot. It's not banned, but
You have to go through some hoops.
I mean,
Here's the
think-
main reason I'm raising it.
I mean, I think it would be hard to permit somebody to put a bathroom right on the lake.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
would think so, but
Right.
I'm raising it mostly because there are a few examples of properties on the lake like that.
Yeah.
And to avoid at least these members of the board down the line saying, holy cow, I never thought that was a possibility. There's a few places where someone could at least ask.
Yeah, you could ask, but there would be a lot of requirements.
Okay.
But they could ask whether or not there was an existing structure there or not.
Say that
Yeah,
again?
yes, right. It doesn't matter that there's an existing structure there, right? They could ask to
Oh,
build
you're
something.
right,
They
even
could-
without an existing
Right, they could
structure.
build on the, right. You could ask to build your ADU with a view of the lake.
I guess my thinking was that these are so close to the shoreline that I guess I was not imagining that someone would ask to build a new detached structure that close to the shore.
Yeah.
But maybe they would.
I mean, I get, again, I don't want to go too many hypotheticals, but what if someone said, park my trailer without wheels right in front of the lake, so I have this beautiful view, and everything's kind of enclosed?
You know, to that point, I would just throw out another idea here. You may have noticed I pay attention to the lake a little bit here in the planning board, like you all do, but could or should there be something that says no detached ADUs within these zones, restricted zones to the lake shore? Is that possible?
Do you do that for a single-family home?
What's that?
Do you do that for a single-family home?
So we use the same approach for the detached structure, as you're
No,
saying?
but the point is that you would go and you would bend the district back for the watershed district, but Gene's right, there's no limit in any of the districts with single-family houses.
Yeah.
It's
there a
the
setback from the
dimension, I
lake?
think what would kill it is the dimension of things, because, somebody could propose to build a full house, big 4,000 square foot house, 10 feet from the thing, but they would never get a variance.
Yeah.
Right, so you need a variance.
All right,
For a new
Thanks.
permanent structure, it goes to ZBA for a variance first, and the only zone is the conservation zone. You can do nothing in, I think it's 75 feet, and that's only since 94 and on. So there's one zone that absolutely you can't do anything, so. Okay, so then we kind of, for the next 4, is define the types of ADU that could be permitted. So if it's completely within, it's by right with no special permit, as long as they comply with the general requirements and the dimensional requirements that we're gonna go through. If it's an ADU created by adding gross floor area, they have to be compliant with attachment 3, which is a summary of dimensional requirements, so that's where we meet the setbacks, Peter. So that structure needs to comply with setbacks, and height, and anything else that's related to construction of a new dwelling. And again, it's by right, but they have to comply with general requirements and dimensional requirements. And then an ADU in an existing detached structure designed to be accessory to a one-family, such as a garage, barn, carriage house, in any zone, single-family zoning district lot, is permitted by limited site plan review with the planning board. And then if it's a new detached accessory structure proposed to be constructed on the lot, it also goes through limited site plan review, and it has to be compliant with all dimensional requirements. The ADU should not be, we discussed this in the presentations, and you opted to leave this in. So the ADU should not be used for boarding or lodging or other commercial use, with the exception of permitted home occupations.
So that doesn't mean you can't rent it. It's still a rent unit, but it's supposed to be a residential, permanent residential unit, something that someone lives in permanently, not an inn or bed and breakfast. That's that's what H is about.
So not used as a short-term rental, should be subordinate in use, size, and design to the one-family dwelling. So again, we'll get regulations
Yeah.
related to that.
So just a quick question, so I guess, what do we mean by design? So use, size, and design? Maybe this is more of a legalese question. I just, use and size is obvious, but like,
Yeah, I guess subordinate and design doesn't really make sense. I think we had J and K together,
yep.
and so I think that, and then I asked to separate them out, so that might have been a vestige of that. So probably subordinate in use and size is probably the better way to write that. I think it's because I took it, I took two and separated them. Because K, I'm not sure if that's going to be allowed.
Yep, so K is maintain the architectural character and be compatible in design with the one-family dwelling where possible and practical.
So that's kind of a compromise of like, we don't know, we probably can't require it to be compatible to the main building, but we can say, hey, if you can, try to make it compatible.
Yep.
So that was kind of a compromise.
So once the ADU is constructed, it can never be allowed, it can never be enlarged beyond half the gross floor area of a one-family dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller, as allowed by statute in the bylaw. And then in order to encourage the development of housing units for individuals with disabilities and handicapped individuals and persons with limited mobility, the building commissioner or the planning board may allow reasonable deviation from the stated provisions of this bylaw, where necessary to install features that facilitate access and mobility for disabled persons. And I think that's just in the spirit of who we want to provide alternative housing choices for.
That's great.
And that, so those were general requirements, and the next section is use, dimensional, and physical requirements. So the ADU has to comply with state building code, Title V, and state sanitary code, mass fire prevention regulations, and other local bylaws and regulations. Any new separate outside entrance serving an ADU shall be located on the side or rear of the building and located so that visibility from the public ways is minimized, or maybe a shared entry hall sufficient to meet requirements of state building code. And then this is where waivers start coming in. So on the request of the applicant, the planning board may waive the provision due to physical constraints or other compelling reasons detailed below for an existing structure, but not for a new structure.
So what we tried to do was we tried to sort out, okay, this is how ideally it should be, but we understand that some buildings are different, some circumstances are different. So later on, we have kind of a list of kind of compelling reasons that, okay, if you really need a waiver, you got to show us that it meets one of these things, and we might be able to grant you a waiver.
So even if it's within or attached, and we've talked about that straight to the building commissioner, if waivers are required, he has to first pause and send that request to the planning board. So in the case of an attached ADU, all stairways to the second and third story shall be enclosed within the exterior walls of the dwelling unit. Again, for the same reasons, waivers can be requested for existing structures, but not for new structures. No new curb cuts should be allowed. Again, in some cases, I think of a corner lot, it might be more appropriate to have a different curb cut. So a waiver provision's allowed for that requirement. And then E kind of sets the findings that the planning board would make in order to grant a waiver. So upon request of the homeowner applicant, the planning board may, after making a finding of fact that a waiver is merited, given the totality of circumstances based on all of the following factors. And so, good sufficient cause, it's not inconsistent with the purpose of this bylaw, a determination that failure to grant the waiver would result in exceptional hardship to the applicant, danger of life or property, necessity to accommodate requests of Concom, zoning board of appeals or historical commission, or any municipal department, extraordinary expenses which is undue given the purpose of the provisions waived, the availability of alternative methods to substantially meet the purpose of the provisions waived. And no municipal function nor any direct abutter will be substantially affected by the waiver. And so there's a big list there that you
Yeah.
would check off.
So, I mean, I don't know if this is the right section to add it, but, you know, going back to kind of my utility comment, especially for detached structures, like, could we add a provision where utilities have to run from the primary dwelling and undergrounded to a detached ADU, and that we could also grant a waiver, right?
So let's hold on that
Okay.
until we get the guidance, because honestly, I'm not sure what we can and can't do on electricals. And it's an easy thing to add once we have some guidance, but I think on that one, I would really like to see what the state has to say about what we're allowed to do and not allowed to do.
Okay.
But keep it.
Yeah.
Let's keep it, but I don't think we need to write it in yet and then workshop it until we.
Yeah.
That one I really want to hear from them. Because I don't think we have it anywhere else, so that one I'd love to see a model bylaw on.
I mean, you know, it seems to me the thing that might be more relevant is that you wouldn't necessarily want to have another wire floated from the street.
Exactly, yeah.
Is that what you're?
Yeah.
is
So
that the
it's,
issue that
it's,
you're-
so in neighborhoods that have not underground utilities, right? You can envision essentially more
Yeah.
wires going
I
to
think
detached
that's a fair-
ADUs, right?
I think that's a little bit, initially I was thinking along the lines of what you said is maybe we're getting a little too deep into it, but I do think when you look at it from that way, fits within our mandate, I think. I mean, after all, planning board rules and regulations require utilities to be underground and do things, so in my mind.
Yeah.
That, something about that fits, but I think let's wait to see it.
Yeah,
come out.
Yeah, and I think we could-
that's definitely a possibility. It should be underground, have a waiver provision.
Yeah.
And so that makes total sense as long as
Yeah.
that makes sense as long as if we're allowed to do it.
And I think the intent is if everything's tied to the primary dwelling, right? Because that's how it's drafted, is that you can have the utilities tied to the primary dwelling, right? So like, I mean, it's, right?
Yeah, I mean, again, I don't know about how things work with
Yeah.
splitting things off and making them, so they're got to be different units, so there needs to be a way to be paid separately.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know if you tie it to the main unit, if now, is it able to be
Yeah,
dual metered and stuff like
I
that?
mean, for me, it's more a separate set of wires from the street that's, you know,
Yeah.
another separate.
Exactly,
You know,
yeah.
or if the original was underground, the new one's above ground, you don't want that. to be
Exactly.
the case.
Okay, so let's keep that in mind as we wait to hear further guidance.
Right, and letter F is the first time I suggest a special permit, and it's related to parking, so we are requiring a minimum of one additional off-street parking space for the ADU. And the planning board may issue a special permit to modify this parking requirement, and I defer to you guys whether you want it to be a waiver or a special permit process. Parking is, especially in the downtown, I mean, there's much more parking on-street, so this provision is to make sure it's provided for off-street.
What would be the difference in what they have to present?
What do you mean by present?
So if we wanted a waiver, you'd have to tell us why you need a waiver of the parking. What would you do differently if you wanted a special
So
permit?
they'd have to say that it's impossible for me to provide an additional parking space on my lot. And we're all gonna share the 4 spaces that I have for the primary dwelling.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure.
So I got maybe a comment here, and I don't know how prescriptive we can get here, but is there a scenario where someone says, oh, I have one parking space, it's my front lawn, and not like, and people you just park on someone's front lawn as a designated parking space? Does that make sense?
Well, they pave it over.
You could.
No,
pave it
but I mean, they definitely could, but I don't know, again, how, but like if they don't pave it over, right? Is it,
I don't,
is that fine? Like, is there any requirements we designated a parking space?
no, I think I mean, I don't think that would pass muster as a parking space. If
I
it's-
don't think it would either.
if
It
it's not
happens.
paved.
It certainly.
Yeah, yeah.
You'd
it
have, I
certainly
think, the case point, I
happens.
think you'd have to pave it over.
Or
Or at least on
crushed stone
a, you'd have to show it on a plan
A parking space.
as a parking space, yeah.
And the statute says we can't require more than
One.
one.
Off-street
Off-street
parking space.
parking,
Right.
okay.
Unless we can't require any within 0.5 feet of a bus station.
And we've got that in there,
Right, 25 miles south, yeah.
okay.
Which is a very small area of town, kind of near 495 on Mass Ave.
All right, and then the next section is special requirements for detached accessory dwelling units. And again, detached are going through limited site plan review in addition to these requirements. So with the exception of 813, that's the one that the stairs have to be enclosed within the building. That's for attached units. All other general requirements and dimensional use and physical requirements apply. Any structure containing a detached unit should not be located in the front yard. Again, I put on request that that could be waived because we know there are some structures existing in front yards, but again, not for a new structure.
Yeah. Gene, do we define front yard
Yes.
somewhere? Okay.
Yeah. So the building height should not exceed the height of the one-family dwelling. And again, ability to get a waiver because we have one-floor ranches with an attached garage that potentially somebody will want to put a unit over a garage.
Now, Jim, what if this is, let's say it's a zoning district that allows 30 foot, and it's a 35-foot house because it's a prior non-conforming use? Can the ADU go up to the prior non-conforming use, or can it only go up to what's allowed by the current zoning bylaw?
I think it would need a variance to go.
To go
above it,
higher.
because it's, you're creating a new
Right.
variance issue.
Well, and it might make sense if you're, doing it as attaching to the top floor of your house. Okay.
You
All right.
can't extend a pre-existing non-conforming use without either getting a variance or going through the zoning board.
Got it.
Okay.
So they-
And Gene, just on the Concom side, so the ADU by right would follow our local wetland
Yeah.
bylaws? Okay.
Yep,
So like contiguous building area and,
all that.
yep, okay.
Any detached ADU may require installation of fencing and/or landscaping for the purpose of screening as a condition of limited site plan review, permit approval. And the detached ADU will maintain a compatible relationship to improvements on adjacent lots in terms of location and will not significantly impair the privacy of abutting residents. And the detached ADU will not result in excessive noise, traffic, or parking congestion. And again, all those are subject to regulations. And we have yet other requirements. No building shall be constructed or changed in use or configuration until the building inspector has issued a permit. No ADU shall be occupied until a certificate of occupancy is issued. If an ADU is discontinued, the owner shall notify the zoning enforcement officer of the removal of the facilities. Upon certification of the zoning enforcement officer, said unit shall be removed from the town's inventory. Administration and enforcement falls under the zoning enforcement officer, who is the building commissioner. The building inspector shall refuse to issue any permit if it's not in compliance with this bylaw, or the terms of any special permit or variance. If the ADU has been built or is being operated in violation of the provisions of the bylaw, the building commissioner may, in addition to other remedies, order the removal of any one or more provisions that create a separate dwelling unit, such as living, sleeping, cooking, or eating. And then, so this now starts to address pre-existing non-conforming structures. So those family suites that are no longer in compliance with their special permit, because the person who is permitted to live there is no longer living there. This kind of is a catch-all to address those. So all structures prior to the date of adoption of this bylaw that contain a self-contained housing unit inclusive of sleeping, cooking, sanitary on the same lot as a one-family dwelling, which was not legally permitted through the zoning board of appeals as a family suite, are illegal and shall be brought into compliance with this Article 8, Part 14, or discontinued. If building permit, oh,
Go ahead, no, I have a comment, but keep going.
so, if building permits for such work are issued prior to December 31, 25, so we assume bylaw gets approved in May, somebody wants to make their family suite now compliant with the ADU bylaw, and building permits are issued before December 31st, and associated construction completed within a year, the owner shall not be subject to penalties otherwise applicable to correction of non-conforming structures.
So
And so,
technically, now I'm just rereading this, which was not legally permitted. Something could have been legally permitted, but then fallen out of.
but if somebody else is living in there,
Yeah.
it's not legally permitted anymore. They would have had to come back and say, now I want my cousin or whoever relative to live there. The special permit only runs with the.
No,
permit
no,
person.
you're right. I think it's definitely not legal, but, which was not legally permitted. It was legally permitted at some point.
But it fell out of compliance.
Yes. Okay, so but that's what I think we should add, which is not legally permitted and/or has fallen out of compliance with a legal permit. I mean, you're right, and it's just kind of nitpicky, but I hate loophole. Well, I love loopholes, but I also don't like loopholes if we're trying to avoid loopholes. So I'm good at finding them. So, which is not legally permitted and/or has,
And- Or was legally
Right.
permitted and is no longer.
right, or is legally permitted and is no longer in compliance. Something along those lines. You can just kind of fill it in and we can figure it out.
Okay, and then this whole family suite discussion, so this was just carrying things
Yeah.
forward. We do add that all family suites legally permitted prior to the date of adoption and operating in compliance
Right.
with the granted special permit shall remain in effect. To convert a legally permitted family suite to an ADU, the owner shall make an application in accordance with this bylaw, and such ADU would need to meet the criteria and definitions set forth in the zoning bylaw. And then all this is just carried from
Yeah, so then we'll leave that.
what was there. And then if a lot contains an accessory dwelling unit, it is not eligible for a family suite special permit. And that, again, is just trying to limit the maximum being 2 dwelling units on a lot.
Well, okay, but we should also say if a lot contains a family suite, it should not, it's
Yeah,
not.
I don't think we can, because ADUs have to be, I went in this direction because the ADU is the one that is by right.
But how can you have it, isn't that the same as,
We don't have any ADUs yet.
right, no, but if you have a family suite, you shouldn't be allowed to have an ADU and a family suite. Because isn't that the same as having a duplex and having an ADU? I mean, I don't think you should be able to, if you already have a family suite, you shouldn't be able to add an ADU also. That's, at least I think, again, we'll see what the state says about duplexes, but I don't think you should be able to have a family suite and then also add an ADU.
I agree, yeah.
The ADU to the family.
Right, you can only have one accessory unit. I don't care what we call it. You can only have one of them on your lot.
Well, so this kind of goes back to I guess we were talking about whether or not to sunset something. If it's ambiguous like that, where people with family suites can then pull an ADU.
Well, but I think we just spell it out. If you have a family, if a lot contains an accessory dwelling unit, it's not eligible for a family suite. If a lot contains a family suite, it's not eligible for an accessory dwelling unit.
Yep. Yeah.
Until they tell us otherwise.
Or we just say that family suites are now, if there's an existing family suite, it's technically an ADU. Maybe that's the way to go about it.
Okay, we'll figure it out, but I think we agree. You get one. Let everyone have one, but you get one.
It could be a little
You
more.
can all have one. Okay.
Do you want to go through the other supplemental?
No, I don't
ones,
think,
or
I mean,
carry
that's
it to next
mostly
week?
housekeeping
Yep.
stuff, right? Yeah, no, I think we're good. Okay, so if anybody does have additional comments that you think of as you're reviewing it, go through it. Let's carry it, but I think we're really at this point waiting for state guidelines. Okay, awesome. Can we get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from November 12th?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Anything before we adjourn? Okay, have a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Enjoy the time,
Motion to adjourn.
please.
Second?
All in favor? Aye. Awesome. All right, that's quicker than I expected.